She walked into the skyscraper chasing a job, but destiny had other plans. Surrounded by power, ambition, and polished perfection, she was just another hopeful face. Until he appeared. The man no one expected to show up. The man whose silent influence had shaped her life for years, without her knowing. Why was he here? Why did he look at her like that, like he knew? Secrets buried in an old orphanage are about to rise. And when they do, nothing will ever be the same. Don't look away. This meeting was never a coincidence. The city rose like steel poetry, cold, sharp, glittering. Somewhere between the honks of taxis and the chatter of passers-by, she stood still on the sidewalk, staring up at the tower that scraped the morning sky. Summit Enterprises. It looked more like a monument than a workplace, its glass panels reflecting the clouds, its presence swallowing the sun. People called it the empire of modern ambition. To her, it was something else entirely. A test. A beginning. She tightened her grip on the thin folder in her hand, resume, credentials, and the weight of every sleepless night she spent studying under flickering dorm lights. Her reflection in the glass door looked composed. But beneath the blazer, her heart beat fast and loud. "You've been through worse," she whispered to herself. "Walk in there like you belong." She did. Not because someone told her so, but because she had to. Inside, the lobby buzzed with the efficiency of a machine. Men in tailored suits. Women in heels that clicked like metronomes. Receptionists barely looking up. Elevators swallowing people whole and spitting them into upper floors of power. But she wasn't just another applicant. She was Ivy Quinn. 29 years old. Graduate in business administration. Raised in the chaotic love of Sunshine Orphanage. Not a single family photo in her wallet. But dreams. She had hundreds of those. She carried them all on her shoulders like armor. Sunshine Orphanage. That name still brought a quiet ache to her chest. Tucked away at the edge of the city, it had been her first taste of kindness. And also survival. It was where she learned how to fight for everything. And it was also the place where, every year, without fail, mysterious donations arrived. New books. Fresh coats of paint. Christmas gifts when no one expected them. No sender. No face. Just hope in anonymous wrapping. As she stepped into the elevator, her finger hovered over the number 58, marketing department. This interview wasn't just about getting a job. It was about proving that everything she had fought for wasn't in vain. That the girl from the orphanage belonged in this world of power suits and pristine glass. As the elevator doors closed, she took one last breath. Let them see me. The elevator doors parted with a soft chime, revealing the 58th floor, a realm of calm precision and calculated elegance. Everything smelled faintly of lavender, paper, and power. Frosted glass divided departments. Polished wood gleamed beneath warm lighting. The hum of conversation was subdued, the kind that said every word was weighed before spoken. Ivy stepped out, smoothing the crease of her blazer, spine straight as a ruler. Her heels clicked against the tile like she belonged there, though her stomach twisted into knots she refused to acknowledge. The receptionist behind the marble counter didn't look up as she tapped away on her keyboard. "Ms. Quinn," she said, eyes still on the screen. "Yes," Ivy replied. "You're early. Please have a seat. HR will be with you in a moment." Ivy offered a tight, polite smile and walked to the waiting area. She sat down, crossed one leg over the other, and clutched her folder in her lap like it could protect her from the weight of everything. From the corner of her eye, she scanned the floor. People moved with direction and purpose. Their blazers looked more expensive. Their laughter was quieter, practiced. Phones buzzed in vibrating pockets and conversations floated by, peppered with words like leverage, acquisition, and synergy. It was intimidating. But she wasn't going to let it get to her. "You're here for a reason. You earned this." She was mid-breath when she felt it. A sudden shift in the room. Subtle, but real. The ambient noise dimmed, as if the air itself paused. The receptionist straightened, her fingers freezing above the keyboard. Two men walking down the hallway lowered their voices mid-sentence. One of them even stepped aside, almost unconsciously. Ivy turned and saw him. Knox Wilder. In person, he was everything the press described and something they couldn't. Power didn't cling to him, it radiated. Not in arrogance, but in silence. Command. Gravity. His suit was dark, expertly cut. His walk was unhurried, as if the world waited on him, not the other way around. Salt and pepper hair, sharp cheekbones, eyes like storm clouds behind glass. She froze. Not because he was the famous CEO of Summit Enterprises, but because she knew him. Not from business magazines or keynote speeches. From sunshine. Christmas mornings. A black coat. A distant silhouette standing by the maple tree beyond the orphanage fence. He never spoke. Never came in. But every child inside that worn-down building waited for him. Because every time he left, magic arrived. Books. Heaters. New sheets. 1 year, even a full piano. And she had never forgotten. Before she could talk herself out of it, Ivy stood. She didn't know what possessed her. Logic told her to sit down, stay quiet, wait for HR. But something else, older, deeper, rose in her chest. She crossed the room quickly, intercepting him just before he reached the elevator again. "Mr. Wilder." He stopped. Turned. His gaze swept over her. Measured, unreadable. "Yes?" His voice was low, polished. The kind of voice built to command boardrooms and make people listen. "You probably don't remember me. But I remember you. Sunshine Orphanage. You used to visit." His expression didn't change. Not right away. But there was a flicker, so brief she almost missed it. He said nothing. "Every Christmas," she continued, heart pounding. "You never came inside. But we saw you. Always standing under the same tree. Always alone. And after you left, gifts would arrive. From someone anonymous." Knox's jaw tightened. Not in anger, more like hesitation. "You have a good memory," he said evenly. "Not really," she replied. "I've just never forgotten what hope looks like." A pause. Something shifted behind his eyes. The cold, polished mask didn't fall, but it thinned. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ivy Quinn." That got a reaction. Subtle, but there. His gaze sharpened, lips parting slightly. Like the name struck a chord somewhere he'd buried long ago. He looked away for a beat, then back at her. "Come with me." She blinked. "Excuse me." "My office," he said simply, already turning toward the corridor of glass walls and frosted doors. "But, I'm here for an interview with marketing. I'm supposed to." "They can wait." His tone left no room for argument. "Mr. Wilder." He stopped. Turned halfway. "Ms. Quinn, I assume you came here seeking something bigger than a desk and a paycheck. Am I wrong?" Her throat tightened. "No. Then come." He walked off. Ivy stood there for a moment, stunned. Every logical voice in her head screamed this was insane. That she should sit back down, wait for HR like a normal candidate. But her feet moved. And her heart told her the truth. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It never was. Knox's private office was a world apart. The hallway leading to it had gone quiet. No footsteps. No murmurs. Just the rhythmic click of Ivy's heels trailing behind him and the whisper of her own breath catching in her throat. He opened a glass door with a discreet scan of his watch, revealing a space that was somehow colder than the rest of the building. Sleek lines, minimalist decor, a single oil painting hanging above a dark walnut bookshelf. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that looked like it belonged to the gods, not men. He gestured toward a leather chair. "Please." Ivy hesitated, then Saturday. Her hands folded tightly in her lap. Knox remained standing for a moment, as if deciding something. Then he crossed the room slowly and took the seat across from her, not behind his desk, but in front of it, just a few feet away. Like this conversation wasn't business. Like it was personal. He looked at her. Long enough for it to start feeling like the walls were leaning in. Then finally, he spoke. "Sunshine wasn't just a place I supported. It was where I was raised." Ivy blinked. You lived there?" He nodded once, gaze drifting to the skyline beyond the glass. "A long time ago. When I was a child. I don't speak about it. Almost no one knows." "Why?" He hesitated. Then, because people don't understand vulnerability in men with power. They weaponize it. And I've worked too hard to build something they can't tear down. Silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of unsaid things. "I remember every corner of that place," he continued, voice lower now. "The cracked window above the hallway sink. The creaking step on the second floor. The way the light hit the chapel windows on winter mornings." Ivy swallowed hard. She remembered those same things. "It wasn't always kind," he added. "But there was one person who kept it from collapsing. Margaret." Ivy's eyes widened. "Sister Margaret." Knox nodded, slower this time. "She found me half-starved in the alley behind St. Mark's Church. I was 10. I hadn't spoken in days. No one knew where I came from." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees now. "Margaret didn't ask questions. She didn't need answers to offer help. She took me in. Protected me. When one of the older boys tried to corner me in the laundry room, she stepped in. When I tried to run away that first winter, she chased me into a blizzard and carried me back." Ivy stared at him, breath shallow. The man in front of her wasn't just a CEO anymore. He was something real. Broken once. Rebuilt. "She saved me," he said simply. Then, softer, "and when I finally made it out, when I started building what you see around us, I promised myself that one day, I'd return. Quietly. Without fanfare. Just give back to the ones still inside those walls. The way she gave to me." Ivy's voice cracked when she finally spoke. "We always wondered who it was. The coats, the gifts, the heaters. I thought maybe it was some charity, or a bored millionaire." Knox shook his head, a faint smile tugging at his mouth. "It wasn't charity, Ms. Quinn. It was a thank you." She looked down, biting the inside of her cheek. "Then, you know. I used to watch you from the upstairs window. Every Christmas. I never told anyone. But I always wondered why you never came inside." Knox's smile faded. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Because I was afraid I'd never leave again. The words hit harder than she expected. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the city far below became background static to something much heavier in the room. Then Knox cleared his throat, more businesslike now. "You've come far, Ivy. Most people don't make it out of sunshine and end up in my office within a decade." She met his gaze. "I didn't come here looking for favors." "I didn't say you did." Another pause. Knox stood by the window, his figure outlined against the blue and gold horizon. For a moment, Ivy couldn't tell if he was watching the skyline or something much farther away. Something unreachable. She remained where she was, still standing in the center of his office. Her heart was still racing, but her mind was starting to connect the dots. His distance. His control. His silence. All of it made sense now. "You've never told anyone, have you?" she asked gently. Knox didn't turn. "Told them what?" "About sunshine. About Margaret. About who you were before all of this." She motioned subtly toward the opulent office around them. "You keep it hidden." He was quiet. "Because you're afraid," she continued, her voice softer now. "Afraid that if they knew, they'd see it as a weakness." At that, Knox finally turned to face her. His eyes met hers, calm but sharp. "People don't invest in broken things," he said. Ivy's throat tightened. There was no anger in his voice, only truth. And exhaustion. The kind that comes from wearing armor too long. "That's not true," she whispered. He raised an eyebrow, not with sarcasm, just curiosity. "I came from that same place," she said. "And I've spent most of my life trying to hide it. Fix my posture. Adjust my voice. Learn the right forks, the right words, the right rules. Just so people wouldn't hear orphan when I spoke." Knox didn't interrupt. He listened. Really listened. "But the truth is," Ivy went on, "what broke us didn't make us weak. It made us aware. Of what matters. Of what it means to be invisible. Of how hard you have to fight, just to stand where others start." A long pause stretched between them. Then Knox looked down, letting out a quiet breath through his nose. "Do you know what happened the first time I tried to tell someone?" he said. "I was 23. Just made my first million. I thought I could trust my co-founder. We were still building Summit from scratch. I told him about sunshine, about being abandoned, about Margaret." He walked back toward his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old silver pen. He turned it slowly in his hands as he spoke. "A week later, he used it against me in a pitch meeting. Said I had emotional instability due to childhood trauma. Said investors needed someone grounded. Someone normal." Ivy felt the burn rise in her chest. Knox set the pen down gently. "That was the last time I shared." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was heavy with understanding. Ivy stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "You built an empire. But you buried yourself under it." Knox looked up, eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in realization. No one had said that to him before. "You hid from the world to protect yourself." "I get it." She paused. Then, with a small smile. "But maybe the world needs to see where you came from. Not because it's weakness, but because it's the reason all this exists in the first place." Knox's jaw flexed. Then he spoke, slower now. "You're not what I expected when I walked in this morning." "Neither are you," she replied with a smirk. Something subtle shifted between them. Not quite trust. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of it. And Ivy knew, as she looked at the man who once stood in the shadows of her childhood, that their stories were far more entwined than either of them had realized. Knox moved behind his desk now, but he didn't sit. Instead, he leaned a hand against the glass surface, eyes focused sharply on Ivy. "So," he said. "Marketing." Ivy straightened slightly, surprised but ready. "Yes. I just completed my degree in business administration from Hudson. I interned in 2 startups during my last year, one in product development, the other in digital strategy." Knox nodded once, silently. She hesitated. Then added, "I know what you're thinking. There are candidates with more experience, better connections, cleaner backgrounds." "I wasn't thinking that," he replied. "But it's interesting that you assume I would." That gave her pause. Her voice softened. "Because most people do." Knox said nothing, but there was a flicker in his expression, something like recognition. Like he'd been there once. Ivy inhaled, then stepped closer to his desk. Her voice steadied. "I want to work in marketing not just because I understand strategy or analytics, but because I understand people. I've watched them from the bottom of the ladder. I've learned what gets ignored. What moves hearts. What makes someone feel something, even when they have nothing." Knox's eyes narrowed slightly. "And you think that gives you an edge?" "I think it gives me perspective." She lifted her chin. "When you grow up in a place like Sunshine, you learn how to sell hope. Not lies. Not illusions. But the kind of hope that's quiet. Earned. Real." He studied her again, longer this time. "So this is personal for you," he said. "Everything is personal," she said without hesitation. "We just pretend it's not." Knox's gaze shifted toward the window, but he wasn't really looking out anymore. He seemed to be weighing something, measuring her words not by surface, but by weight. "And why Summit?" he asked finally. "You could have chosen a dozen other firms. Smaller, more forgiving." Ivy gave a soft, almost defiant smile. "Because Summit is built to influence. And I don't want to sit on the sidelines anymore. I want to be part of something that moves the conversation, not just reacts to it." Knox raised a brow. "Ambitious. Is that a problem?" "Only if it comes without clarity. I've had to fight for clarity my whole life." That stopped him. His eyes rested on her for a long, quiet beat. Then, slowly, he Saturday. He leaned back in his chair, hands steepled, expression unreadable, but no longer distant. "You speak like someone who doesn't just want a job," he said. "I don't," Ivy replied. "I want a place where what I've lived through can matter. Not be erased." Silence again. But it was the kind that followed impact. The kind that said, "This conversation just shifted." Finally, Knox exhaled through his nose and looked down at the surface of his desk. Then back up. "I'll make sure someone from HR speaks to you today," he said. "The process will be unconventional. But if you meant what you said, every word, you'll be ready for it." Ivy's lips parted in surprise. "So, this wasn't my interview?" A faint smile touched the corner of his mouth. "No, Ms. Quinn," he said. "This was me deciding if I should give you one." The door clicked shut behind Ivy as she left Knox's office, heart still pounding, not from nerves, but from something more electric. More alive. Whatever just happened in that room. It wasn't an interview. It was something else. And she didn't walk out the same way she walked in. She had barely taken 3 steps toward the reception desk when a woman in a navy pantsuit approached her, hand extended. "Ms. Quinn. I'm Clarissa from HR. I was told you'd be joining us for the next round." Ivy smiled and shook her hand. Yes, thank you. Clarissa led her into a smaller, glass-walled conference room with a long, clean table and a view of the lobby below. A panel interview. 3 people already sat waiting, 2 men in button-downs and 1 woman with a tight bun and an even tighter smile. It began like any standard corporate dance. Questions about campaigns, KPIs, branding shifts in a post-digital economy. Ivy held her own, steady and articulate, even cracking a well-placed joke that earned a laugh from the guy on the right. Then, it happened. The door opened. Knox's assistant leaned in, pale and tight-lipped. Excuse me. Mr. Wilder needs to see Ms. Quinn. Now. The room went still. Ivy blinked. Is something wrong? The assistant didn't answer, just held the door. Confused, Ivy stood and followed her. They didn't speak during the walk. Just the soft thud of footsteps down the hall, and the growing sense that something had shifted in the air. Knox was already standing when she entered. His back was to the window, but his body language was different now, tense, braced. He turned slowly. His expression was unreadable. But his voice wasn't. Sit down. Ivy's stomach twisted. What's going on? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid a tablet across the desk. On the screen, her name. A file. Locked. Stamped in red. Confidential, level 3 access required. And beneath it. Sealed record, juvenile case. Her breath caught. Where did you get that? She asked, voice almost a whisper. It flagged your name when HR uploaded your resume into our internal vetting system, Knox said evenly. It's a government-sealed file. Encrypted. Someone went out of their way to bury it. Ivy swallowed hard, hands in her lap now. Cold. I didn't know it was still there, she said quietly. Knox folded his arms. What's inside it? Silence. Her jaw clenched, but she met his eyes. There was no way around it now. When I was 13, I broke into the infirmary at Sunshine. Knox's eyes narrowed, but he didn't speak. My roommate, Ava, she had asthma. Severe. One night, she had a full-blown attack, and we couldn't find a single staff member. It was Christmas Eve. They'd all gone to some charity dinner. Her voice began to tremble, but she didn't stop. I knew where they kept the meds. But it was locked. So I broke the cabinet open and took the inhalers. Saved her life. Knox's voice came low. You were arrested. No. She exhaled slowly. I was caught. A staff member found the mess, reported the theft. But Ava told them the truth. The police were called anyway. I didn't deny it. Margaret tried to protect me, but they filed a report. Juvenile charge, misdemeanor theft, but it got flagged under medical access violation. Technically, it's sealed. Or? It's supposed to be. Knox sat down slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Why didn't you mention this? Her voice rose, not in defiance, but in pain. Because it was the lowest moment of my life, and I didn't want it to define me. Because people don't see why you did something, they only see that you did it. A long, tense pause stretched between them. Knox looked down at the tablet again. Then back at her. And you've had no other incidents? None. Not a parking ticket. Not a missed rent payment. Nothing. She leaned forward slightly. You said earlier that people don't invest in broken things. A pause. But I'm not broken. I'm just not spotless. Knox sat back, studying her. Something in his expression shifted, less suspicion, more something else. Thoughtfulness. Conflict. He tapped a finger against the tablet, then slid it aside. "The file doesn't scare me," he said finally. Ivy blinked. "Then? What does?" Knox stared at her for a moment that felt like an eternity. "That the world out there won't care about the truth the way I do." Knox closed the tablet and leaned back slowly, but something in him had shifted. His usual composure, the sharp clarity, the unshakable CEO presence, had begun to fray around the edges. Ivy saw it in the way he pressed his thumb against his temple. In the pause that lingered too long. "You okay?" she asked gently. He looked up, his eyes momentarily unfocused, as if returning from somewhere far away. "I thought I could keep it all separate," he murmured. "Business. Past. Emotion. But you." He trailed off. Ivy waited. Knox stood and walked toward the window again, hands in his pockets now. The city looked smaller from up here. But whatever he was wrestling with, it felt enormous. Finally, he spoke again. "I knew your name before you walked in here." Ivy froze. "What do you mean?" He didn't turn around. His voice came low, steady, but filled with something deeper. "You asked me earlier why I visited Sunshine. Why I stayed anonymous." He turned then, his eyes locking onto hers. "The truth is, I wasn't just repaying a debt to Margaret." He paused, choosing each word with care. "Years ago, I attended a summit in Rio de Janeiro. A climate change conference. I was young, still angry at the world, still trying to prove I mattered. That week changed me. Because that's when I met her." Ivy's heartbeat quickened. "Huh?" Knox nodded. "Eliza." The name landed like a stone in her chest. She was speaking on behalf of a grassroots organization, small, underfunded, but fiercely committed. She stood up in front of a room full of world leaders and tore apart a multi-billion-dollar mining proposal with nothing but data, conviction, and that voice. His eyes softened. She didn't just speak. She moved people. Me included. Ivy felt something shift in the air between them, like a wire being pulled tight. "You knew my mother," she said slowly. Knox nodded again, this time heavier. "I didn't love her," he admitted, "but she changed me. Made me see the world differently. And then, 2 years later, I heard she'd died. Some sort of accident in Brazil. The story didn't sit right. I looked into it." He walked back to his desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out a slim folder. Her death was covered up. Too quickly. Too quietly. And in the process, I found something else. He slid the folder across to Ivy. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, a photo. Grainy. Faded. Her mother holding a baby in her arms. "Huh? You tracked me down," she whispered. "It wasn't hard. The records were there, barely. You'd been placed in Sunshine just months after Eliza's death. No relatives. No protection. You were alone. And you just watched me." Knox's voice grew rougher now. "At first, yes. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to be. A stranger. A savior. I told myself it was enough to send things. To make sure you were okay. But then, I saw you, year after year, growing, fighting, surviving." He looked at her, no longer the CEO, no longer the man behind glass walls. Just a man who had carried a secret too long. "I watched you climb out of that place without help. Get into university. Work 2 jobs. And even then, you still found time to help the younger kids. That's when I realized. You didn't need me to save you. Her throat burned. Then why show yourself now? Knox's eyes met hers, no walls left. Because watching from afar wasn't enough anymore. Because I couldn't keep pretending the past didn't matter. Not when you've done everything to make it mean something. Ivy sat back slowly, the room spinning just slightly. She wasn't angry. Not exactly. But she was overwhelmed. So what now? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Knox gave the smallest shake of his head. That's up to you. She held his gaze. Her mind was reeling, but her voice stayed firm. I don't need a father figure, Knox. I never meant to be one. Then what do you want to be? He paused. Then said, quietly but clearly. Someone who makes amends. 3 weeks had passed since that day in Knox's office. And yet, everything still felt as though it had just happened yesterday. Ivy hadn't told him about the folder. Not yet. She'd kept it close, hidden in the bottom drawer of her apartment desk, beneath old notebooks and job interview notes. Not because she didn't trust Knox. But because some truths needed space before they could be shared. And then came the message. From Lily. Ivy had almost missed it, an email in her junk folder, the subject line plain. I found something. It's about your parents. It had been years since they last spoke. Lily, once the shy girl with ink-stained fingers and a knack for translating gossip into poetry, was now a published translator living in Lyon. They hadn't seen each other since graduation. But when Ivy read the message, her heart dropped straight to the floor. 2 days later, a cafe in Midtown. The cafe was warm, quiet, tucked between a bookstore and a gallery that no one ever went into. Ivy spotted Lily instantly. Her hair was shorter now, streaked with copper. A satchel lay across her chest, stuffed full of papers. Lily, Ivy breathed, embracing her. You look stronger, Lily smiled. Like the city's made of you now. You look like a Parisian art critic. They both laughed, but the warmth lasted only seconds. Lily's smile faded. She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila folder. I wasn't looking for this, she said. I was working on translating some documents for a legal team in Brazil. Environmental violations, mining, illegal drilling, you name it. One of the companies listed. It's a subsidiary of Meridian Resources. Ivy's pulse skipped. Meridian. Lily nodded. Owned by Summit Enterprises. Silence fell like a weight between them. What does this have to do with me? Lily hesitated. Then slid the folder across the table. Inside were photocopies, government files, reports in Portuguese, half-redacted emails. And then a photo. A car. Crushed. Burned. Surrounded by jungle and smoke. Ivy's throat closed. That's the car your mother and father were in. She shook her head slowly. They told me it was an accident. A landslide. Lily's voice dropped to a whisper. It wasn't. It was a cover-up. Witnesses said they were being chased. A local journalist believed they had uncovered something tied to illegal land grabs by Meridian's local contractors. They were trying to leave the country. They didn't make it. The room spun. Ivy struggled for air. Why now? Why me? Lily leaned closer, her eyes fierce. Because that's not all. Ivy. You weren't in that car. She blinked. What? You were already at Sunshine. You were sent back early because you had a fever. But someone else was with them. A chill raced down Ivy's spine. Lily pulled out another paper. A scanned intake form from an Argentinian orphanage, dated 20 years ago. There was a boy. 7 years old. Injured. No ID. Listed under the name Theo Alvarez, but his original file said Quinn. Ivy's hand flew to her mouth. No. You have a brother, Ivy. He survived. They thought he died with your parents, but someone rescued him. He was adopted by a family in Argentina a year later. Ivy sat back, breathless. Where is he now? Lily gave a soft, almost stunned smile. He found me. A week later, Buenos Aires, Argentina. The sun dipped low over the skyline, painting the city in a golden wash. Ivy stood at the door of a quiet apartment on the edge of Palermo. Her hand hovered above the buzzer. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears. Lily stood beside her, silent. The door opened before she knocked. A man stood there. Late 30s. Strong jaw, dark hair, deep-set eyes that looked just like hers. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. Not until he whispered, "You're Ivy." Her voice cracked. "You're Theo." He pulled her into a hug before either of them could cry. And then they did. Inside, over cups of bitter mate and the scent of fresh paint, Theo told his story. How he remembered the crash in pieces, flames, screams, his mother's arms around him. How a stranger had pulled him from the wreck and handed him off to a rural clinic. How he was sent to an orphanage under a new name, forgotten by the world. "They told me no one survived," he said. "That I had no one. But I always knew that wasn't true. I remembered your face. I drew it over and over until I forgot the sound of your name." Ivy reached for his hand. "You found me." Theo smiled through tears. "I never stopped looking." The folder felt heavier than it should have. Ivy held it close to her chest as she entered the elevator, each floor she ascended drawing her closer to a reckoning she hadn't been ready for until now. She had spent the last week going over every page, every witness statement, every translated report Lily had handed her. She'd cross-referenced names, double-checked dates. And through it all, one name kept appearing. Meridian Resources. A company owned, then quietly spun off, by Summit Enterprises. Owned by Knox Wilder. She stepped out onto the executive floor, past the polished halls and silent stares of assistants, who sensed something brewing in the air. When she entered Knox's office, he was seated behind his desk, reading a printed quarterly report. He looked up the moment she walked in, and he knew. She didn't sit. She dropped the folder onto the desk. The sound of it echoed in the room. Knox's eyes went to the cover, then slowly up to meet hers. "Where did you get this?" "Lily." She was working on a translation case in Brazil. She found documents about land seizures, forced removals, bribes to silence witnesses. About a car crash that killed 2 environmental activists. "My parents." Knox's expression darkened. He opened the folder and began scanning the contents. "Meridian Resources," Ivy said flatly. "Your company." He didn't flinch. But he didn't deny it either. "I need to know," she said. Her voice cracked slightly. "Did you know what they were doing?" Knox closed the folder with a careful, deliberate motion. Then he stood. "I didn't," he said. "How is that even possible?" She snapped. "It was your company." "It was a subsidiary," Knox replied, calmly but not coldly. "One of dozens at the time. I had just taken Summit public. I delegated oversight to a regional board. Brazil was a blip on a map to the people in charge. But people died, Knox." He exhaled, stepping around the desk to face her more directly. And when I found out, I shut them down. I hired investigators, bought out the local contracts, fired the board, sold the assets at a loss just to get out. But it was already too late. Ivy's voice was shaking. Why didn't you tell me? Knox's voice softened. Because you'd just found out who your mother really was. Who I was. Because you were already carrying more pain than anyone your age should. And because I was ashamed. Silence. A long, quiet silence that ached in both of them. You knew Meridian might have had something to do with it, Ivy said finally. And you still watched me grow up. Still sent money. Still let me believe you were some distant benefactor with a kind heart. Knox nodded slowly. I didn't step in because I thought I'd done enough damage already. Ivy's throat burned, her fingers curled into fists. You could have told me the truth. And what would that have changed? Knox asked. Would it have brought them back? Or would it have shattered what little you had left? She looked away, blinking fast. You still should have told me. Knox took a step closer, quieter now. I didn't stay silent to protect myself, Ivy. I stayed silent to protect you. But I see now. Maybe that wasn't my decision to make. He paused. You deserve to know everything. No more sealed files. No more secrets. Ivy met his gaze again, and for the first time, there was something raw in his expression. Not authority. Not power. Regret. Real. Human. Deep. She wanted to hate him. Part of her still did. But another part, the one that remembered a black coat under a maple tree, and a piano delivered when no one expected it, wasn't sure she could. She took a breath. Swallowed the storm in her chest. I'm not ready to forgive you, she said, voice low. Knox nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. But I'm also not ready to walk away. This time, he didn't speak. He just nodded once, slow and heavy, as if he knew how much it cost her to say that. And silently, a new kind of agreement passed between them. Not peace. Not closure. But a beginning. The gates hadn't opened in over 10 years. They groaned slightly on rusted hinges as Ivy pushed them apart, the cold December wind threading through her coat. A swirl of dust lifted from the old stone path, like the ghost of memories past, dancing briefly before settling into silence again. Sunshine Orphanage stood before her, worn, weathered, but not broken. She turned to see Theo walking behind her, a bundle of garlands in his arms, and Knox further down the gravel drive, sleeves rolled up, giving firm instructions to a group of workers moving a crate marked New Books Library wing. The three of them had never imagined they'd end up here. Together. Rebuilding the place where everything started, and everything fell apart. But somehow, the past had led them back, through loss, through truth, through forgiveness. Back to this hilltop sanctuary that once held more silence than song. And now, it was humming with life again. 2 weeks earlier, Ivy stood in Knox's office, holding a blueprint in one hand and a mission in the other. If we're going to do this, she said, we do it right. No patch jobs. No charity press releases. We rebuild Sunshine with dignity. With permanence. Knox nodded. We'll fund it through a separate trust. Quietly. No summit branding. No public names. Theo leaned forward, pointing to a room on the plan. That space there. I want it to be a music room. Like the one I used to sneak into before bed. The piano saved me more nights than I can count. Knox looked at him. Then we'll give them music. Now, Christmas Eve. Snow powdered the walkway like sugar. Inside, Warm lights glowed through the windows of the newly restored orphanage. Laughter echoed from the common room, where the first group of children were already settling in, some shy, some wide-eyed, some still clutching the edges of trauma. Ivy and Theo stood near a towering Christmas tree in the center of the main hall. Its branches sparkled with gold ribbon and little paper ornaments handmade by the kids. "You remember when we used to cut snowflakes from cereal boxes?" Theo smiled, looping another string of lights. "And taped them to the windows with band-aids." Ivy laughed. He chuckled. "Yeah. Back when the only gifts we got were second-hand puzzles with missing pieces." She looked around the room, new furniture, bright paint, shelves full of books. "This place will never feel like that again," she said softly. "Not under our watch." From the corner, Knox approached. He held a small, wooden plaque in his hand. Ivy read the inscription aloud. "Sunshine Orphanage, a home for hope." Beneath it, in smaller print, "In honor of Eliza Quinn, whose voice never faded. And to every child still waiting to be heard." Ivy's eyes welled up. "Knox? Thank you." He shook his head. "No. Thank you for not letting it stay buried." Theo placed the final ornament on the tree, a tiny silver star. And for a long moment, they all stood in silence, watching it glint under the soft lights. Later that night, the common room was filled with music and the smell of gingerbread. Children ran between tables, faces bright with wonder. Somewhere in the corner, Theo sat at the new piano, fingers trailing over keys with the kind of grace only years of aching could teach. Ivy sat near the fire, a blanket over her knees. Her gaze wandered to the photo now hanging above the mantel, Margaret, standing with two small children, her and Theo. Faded but unmistakable. She smiled through the quiet sting of tears. "You found your way back," she whispered. Knox sat beside her, a cup of tea in hand. "So did you." She turned to him. "You think this is what healing looks like?" He nodded. "I think this is what family looks like." She looked around, at the children, at her brother, at the fire glowing steadily like a heartbeat that had never really stopped. And finally, she understood. Family isn't always where you come from. Sometimes, it's where you choose to stay. And Sunshine wasn't just a name on a rusted gate anymore. It was home. From the cracked walls of an orphanage to the gleaming towers of power, Ivy Quinn walked a path few would dare to follow, and even fewer could survive. She wasn't just searching for a career, or even for truth. She was searching for herself. What she found instead were pieces of a past erased, a mother silenced, a brother lost, and a man bound by guilt and choices. She unearthed secrets that could have broken her. But instead, they built her. Because in the chaos of discovery, in the wreckage of betrayal and the softness of reconciliation, Ivy found something greater than answers. She found connection. She found legacy. She found purpose. This is not just a story of survival. It's a story of reclaiming what was taken. Of lighting a match in a dark room, and realizing you are the flame. Sunshine Orphanage was never just a place. It was a beginning. A beacon. And now, because of her, it's home again.